In this episode of Lab Matters with me, Harriet Gould, CEO Rowan Sheedy gives us the financier's perspective on the business side of science. Today, I am joined by Rowan Sheedy. Rowan is the CEO at Image Analysis Group, known as IAG. They're based in London, and it's a contract research organisation which you joined about a year or so ago, didn't you, Rowan? Now, you spent about 25 years in the life sciences businesses, um, in life sciences businesses, um, but you didn't come from a science background. So it'd be nice to join the dots on that one a little bit.
Yeah, no, I didn't come from a science background at all. My dad's family were all lawyers, and my mum's side is medical in the main, so doctors and nurses and that side of things. But I had I suppose, unfortunate experience in school. I'm from Dublin. I went to school in Terranure in Dublin, and it's a bit similar to the English system in that you do what's called an intercert at 15, and you drop subjects and you choose what you're going to go on to at that point. And so I had 3 years of secondary school behind me there. I hadn't had the same science teacher for any 2 consecutive years, and so my knowledge of science was incredibly disjointed and honestly very ill-formed. My main memory of science was a very old teacher called Father Grace, who would have been in his very late 70s at that stage. He was on his cow. And the most memorable thing about science, he was a chemist, I think, by training, was he used to lift people up by the sideburns if they weren't paying attention or whatnot. You wouldn't get away with it now. And so I dropped all the sciences as soon as I could, and went down a much more kind of, I suppose, liberal arts side of things with history and English and languages and some economics and whatnot. So yeah, I really didn't start out with sciences in my headlights. Um, and I would say even with my first step, and then I studied economics and business. And I did a degree in that in Trinity in Dublin, and then did a master's in Lancaster. And no sniff of science anywhere near me at that point either. And even my first job was very much like The Office, only without the funny bits, in a cardboard box factory in Thatcham, in Berkshire. And I didn't stay with that for very long, but I found my way into the life sciences through generic pharma. So I joined a company called IVAX in 2001, which is generic pharma. I was a baby management accountant. I just qualified and was setting it out into the world there. And it really, yeah, that was the start of what's been, as I say, plus 25 years in life sciences. And whilst generic pharma might not strike you as being the closest to science, given that it's really kind of quite commercially driven, actually, I was very lucky. They had a fantastic devices team there, headed up a guy called Brian Barney, and I kind of learned a lot about Anderson cascade testing and all that good stuff with respiratory products and oropharyngeal deposition and all these amazing things, and learn more about the science of developing generics and reverse engineering drugs, and just thought it was quite interesting. And I really, more than anything, I fell in love with the sort of social good of it. And the drug industry doesn't always get a great kind of play in the press, but actually, what they do is amazing. And I think generic drugs are a fantastic thing. Making expensive drugs available for a fraction of the price to a much broader audience, and they have genuine equivalency. I think that's a phenomenal thing. And one I'm very proud to have been associated with and been involved in. I did 5 years with that. And I kind of learned a lot about the chemistry side of things, particularly in that there were a couple of fantastic portfolio managers who came from very good science backgrounds, like Fergal Hennessy in particular. And just listening to them talk about it, I found it wildly and interesting in a way that really didn't kind of resonate with my sort of being lifted by the sideburns experience of chemistry generally. So I found it very interesting, and I really liked, from an ethical perspective, I suppose my folks were both very ethics heavy and about doing something worthwhile in life. And why would you do something else? I think this is an amazing thing to be a part of. And my job is very much facilitating those who can. I can't. I'm never going to contribute anything particularly notable on the scientific side, and that's okay. But my job is to lay a platform that allows those who can to do their thing, and to be brilliant and to innovate and to bring great science to the world and to change our world, which is great. It's I think that's a great thing to be a part of and to be able to play a role in. So yeah. So no, not a science background, no. Um, and I was very lucky. So IVAX got bought by a very large Israeli firm called Teva, who were at that stage the biggest generics company in the world. Uh, their headquarters was up in Leeds. I was not, and I didn't want to move to Leeds at that stage. My wife, who is a chemist, she's a PhD in atmospheric chemistry, and so therefore much stronger on this than I am. She was working in the House of Parliament, and we had just moved to London, and so we wanted to stay there. So I was very lucky. I moved to LGC, which had been the laboratory of the government chemist at some point, and is now enormous. And I think it's Science for a Safer World is their tag now. And it was still at that point, you had Richard Worzik involved. Richard was I think he's Sir Richard Worzik. He had taken it private in 1996, its last privatization under John Major, and an amazing man, a very really inspiring man. He had been the government chemist as well, and I didn't know that there was a government chemist. It sounds like an amazing thing. So the government chemist is the arbiter in any dispute involving chemistry and gets paid the prince. I'm sure it's gone up with inflation, but used to get paid the princely sum of £10 a year for the privilege. So when I joined, at the time government chemist was he was testifying in the case of, I can't remember who it was, versus Birdseye, because Birdseye claimed that their fish fingers are 99% fish, and somebody said, "Oh no, they aren't." It was Sainsbury's maybe, and so that was my introduction to the government chemist as a role and a thing. And so, I mean, for LGC, I was there as group financial controller, working for a phenomenal CFO called Jeff Battersby, who's one of the brightest people I've ever come across. And for me, that was an amazing learning place. And again, in terms just of the social good of science, it was an incredible place. It's the National Institute of Metronomy, and so I learned a lot about that, and that was quite interesting. And was involved in really a very broad range of things. So at that stage, LGC did about 40% of the police forensics in the UK. So I learned a lot about forensics and the very different types of forensics and requirements of that. Learned a lot about GCP and GMP and all of the good stuff on the quality standards, which I hadn't really been exposed to previously, and a lot of actual wet labs, because IVAX, for all the many things I did see there, I didn't see any wet labs. That was just a different thing. So and really just very impressive people, incredibly devoted and singular scientists who were there for the science. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about any of that stuff. It was really about the pure science and moving that on, and that was just brilliant people to be around. And I think if I was to give anybody career advice, it's surround yourself with brilliant people, because you'll have a brilliant time. You learn a lot from them, and just watching somebody enjoy the science and enjoy development, so it's a great thing, and again, it's a brilliant thing to support and be a part of. And so yeah, so a lot of stuff within that. I ended up and I was exposed to the whole of it as the group financial controller, which is the worst job in any business, because you're there to be kicked by everybody. But I ended up as finance director for the reference materials business. And when I joined, instead of reference materials to me, I would have thought it was books. But learned an awful lot about that, and traveled the world with it as well. Bought a business in South Africa, went out, was the guest of honor to the National Institute in China, trying to sort of negotiate access to the Chinese pharmacopoeial standards. And
how did you find that?
it was incredible. It was I'd never been the guest of honor at anything. So it was very interesting, and that must be nearly 15 years ago now. But incredibly interesting.
Were you serenaded? What's it? What? How do you How can you tell that you are the guest of honor?
Well, so when I got to the institute, my name was up in lights outside. I mean, literally on a which is incredible. And uh, I was presented with flowers, and people shook my hand, and they also I looked like David Beckham, which I have never looked like.
Oh,
Um, yeah, it was incredible, and taken out as guest of honor every night, and made eat things that, in all truth, I didn't particularly like. I don't think I ever need to eat sea cucumber again. But very kind, but the colon of the sea. Um, but that was fantastic. And got to many other places. Spent a lot of time in Poland and Czech Republic and around South Eastern Europe, and yeah, really incredible. And learned a lot about it. There's a site in Luckenwalde where they were making impurity standards. So I learned all about impurities and the chemistry of that, and the sophistication involved in that. And again, amazing laboratories and phenomenally impressive chemists. Gunter Funk ran the site, and there's just some really brilliant people.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I learned a lot about that. And again, I think at this stage, I can probably pass myself off as having some knowledge in the science side of things. Even if you ask me, I can probably get through the first two questions. The third question has me. But that's okay. That's okay.
great.
So yeah, I spent 7 years there. Um, and was very lucky with that. And a lot of those people have gone on to do amazing things as well. So Julian Braybrook, who's now the government chemist, I knew Julian very well, kind of in his job on again, doing very interesting stuff and developmental work. And there were people who just dazzled me with all these words I didn't understand when I joined. By the time you left, you're kind of going, okay, I think I actually understand what you're talking about now. It makes sense to me. But yeah, really impressive company, and it's gone from strength to strength since I was there. They had just gotten into genomics as I was leaving, and have become a big genomics player, and really all over the world, and have changed hands I think 3 times since I was there. KKR and Astorgs, and really impressive business. And so Ewan Sullivan, who was the chief exec when I left, he's just left after it must be about a 14-year stint there. Be interested to see what he does next. But it's very interesting to see what was the laboratory, the government chemist, turn into a meaningful world force in scientific tools and science tools. That's an impressive journey, and a really impressive growth there. Again, some brilliant people. A guy I'd hoped to keep more contact with, but never managed to, was the ex-government chemist, a guy called Derek Craston, who's a radiochemist, and most of the last 10 or 12 years of my career have been in one way or another circle around radiochemistry. So it was poor on my part to lose contact with Derek, but yeah, very interesting. And I sort of reached the end of my track there after about 7 years, and went into another business that I didn't understand when somebody talked about it, which was is really a pet business, doing PET scans, which I was naive enough not to really know what the hell that meant. So positron emission tomography, obviously, called Imanova, and Imanova was in Hammersmith. It had been GSK's imaging center. They spun it out in 2010, so it was a joint venture between the MRC, King's Imperial, and UCL. And just one of those little diamonds of a business, with just populated by genius, doing amazing stuff very quietly, and without really catching anybody's attention outside a very small cadre of people. And I went in as finance director, and spent about a year just watching these amazing people and working out what it is they did. And so, phenomenal preclinical and clinical imaging work, mostly related to the neurodegenerative diseases. And so I learned a huge amount about that, and the kind of clinical implications of neurodegenerative diseases and the things you have to do in a clinic. So you can't have black floor mats because that could look like a chasm to somebody with Alzheimer's, for example. And the color schemes in the scanning suites are hugely important, and a lot of physics around scanners and what they pick up, and the slightly science fiction-esque ring of crystals that form PET scanner. Well, less so now with the digitization things, but really, really interesting. And stayed in that business for 10 years. Took it through a sale to an American zero called in Vicro, and 3 years in Boston with them. But really amazing, and I think I'll never stop being amazed by the just the astounding people and the amazing physics that people bring to bear on that. And I hadn't had that much exposure to kind of physics side of things. LGC was more chemistry, but really, really incredible stuff. And the developments that group of individuals have been responsible for in terms of the kind of analysis paradigms for neuroscience have been incredible. So, Roger Gunn was there at the time. He's not there now. Came up with a phenomenal scoring system for Alzheimer's, which allows for the stratification of patients. And there's no kind of commonly accepted biomarker for the development of Alzheimer's. And that kind of is one. Ilan Rabiner, who's incredible on imaging applications for neuroscience, and is just interested in that. Nothing exists for him sort of below the neck. It's just not interesting. It's all about and really inspiring people. And Lisa Wells on the preclinical side, again, just incredibly impressive people. And you learn so much by osmosis as much as anything else. So I now know much more than I ever thought I would about radio labeling and the kind of characteristics of isotopes and their half-lives, and how long those half-lives are useful in a scanner, and signal to noise ratios and all those good things. They're really incredible, and brilliant people to work with. Again, just watching people with a massive passion for what they do. The downside of that is that passion doesn't translate into giving two hoots about whether the business is surviving or not. So that was very much what I brought to the table. Is that's great, nice if somebody paid us to do that. And so that was all part of the kind of journey. There was taking it from loss making to be nice if we could actually pay, all our bills. And so that was fun.
It would be nice, actually, if you could talk us through your process for doing that. I was going to ask you what you would look for in a company, aside from good people and great science. If there are any other things that you actually look for in terms of the economic side of things, and then your process when you're actually with a company, how that works.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the things you look for are is there an actual need for what the company is doing, and is that a current need, and is there a future to that need as well? There's plenty of, I'm not going to go join a typewriter company at this stage. I think that you kind of missed that boat. And is the company is there intellectual property in the company? Now, it doesn't need to be IP that you can register and can own, but if you don't have IP, you're basically commoditized. So somebody else can come along and do exactly the same things you were doing, and that turns into a pricing competition game, which is sort of less fun to be in, and there's less innovation typically in those businesses because they don't generate enough money for the innovation, and there's no market for all that good stuff. So I look for that, and for again personally, I want to be involved in companies that do a social good. So is the company doing something that I actually think contributes to society and will be better? Sounds very grandiose, but actually, it's a choice you can make. There's plenty of businesses that do that, and it's not that onerous to just go, is the world a better place because these people are doing what they do? Yes, great, perfect, let's do it. So that and the potential to grow. Frankly, I like something that is good. The foundations are there, and if you do the right things, it can be bigger and better, and broadcast its brilliance and have more of an impact. So that's really what I look for. And then good people, again, the chemistry with the people you're going to be working for is crucial. So it's got to be people you like and respect and can get on with, and you think you'll kind of speak the same language and find common ground. They're really the things I look for. And in terms of the process, the process for me, your first, I would say it's a whole year, but a lot of listening, just listen to people, because what I've always found in all the science businesses I've worked in over 25 years is people say amazing things to their colleagues and then never think of saying them to anybody outside the business. And so you use these just astounding developments, and then they go for lunch. And just kind of bringing that out and making sure, well, why don't we actually tell people we've done this incredible thing that we could also do for them? Um,
Have you got an example of something you heard?
oh God, lots of examples of that, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, lots of analytical tools or analysis tools or paradigms that well, Christ, that's incredible. Yeah, we just did it for that study. Okay, why did we just do it for that study? And getting people to talk to us. So I can't think of any specific examples off the top of my head, but lots and lots of that where, somebody's done something, maybe published a paper, and that's it, and they've never gone. They kind of never gone to anybody who works in that field. So let's say they developed something for looking at, the volumetrics of tumors, and so they publish a paper, but they never go and talk to any company who are working on oncology drugs and say, actually, we have this thing that will characterize, do the volumetrics, but also characterize the surface of the tumor and all that. Never think of doing that. And so, bringing a little bit of that, I was lucky, I suppose. I've been lucky over my career. I have a finance background. I'm a management accountant by training, so not a proper accountant. And I, at some point when I was working for IVAX, um, I ended up doing I helped them buy 3M's respiratory portfolio, and then got stuck with not stuck with, but was asked to do the integration of that into the business. And so I did a postgraduate diploma in marketing from that, and then got involved in sort of the marketing and understanding the sales side of things, which I had no real exposure to at all, and then into the operations of how you actually, from a practical perspective, integrate that into a business and do all that good stuff. And so I'm quite nosy. I like to poke my nose into all sorts of everything in a business, and so a lot of time listening to people and understanding that, and then again just watching how people do things, and then asking, why do we do that way? Is that the best way to do that? Not on the science side of things. What you do in the lab is beyond me, and I'm okay with that. But more the processes of how you get from A to B, and how you check things and who's involved in that, and just trying to make that a little bit more efficient, and then bringing in the right people to communicate it out to the market. So in Imanova, I brought in the first sales guy, and there was such a skepticism about a salesperson. You bring this guy in a shiny suit in to tell lies about us in the market. Actual quote. There's a guy called Ian Hallett, who's a fantastic guy, and it took a little while, but over about a year, Ian began to sell things, and he had great contacts in the industry. He's retired now. That did a brilliant thing when he retired. He cycled from the UK all the way through Eastern Europe to China. And his wife did most of the cycle with him. So an amazing guy,
Wow.
really, really, really nice guy.
Really
But Ian did a
miles.
good job. It was really, really impressive. But Ian did a great job of that, and so we became more of a selling organization, and having been sort of 80% academic revenue over sort of 2-3 years, we became 80% commercial revenue, and that makes you sustainable and allowed us to grow and to fund bringing more people in and doing better science, and ultimately selling the business out of kind of the academic collaboration into in vitro, which was a privately owned imaging CRO based in Boston, owned by an amazing guy called Jack Hoppen. And Jack Hoppen owns a business called Ratio Therapeutics now, which is developing radioligand therapies for oncology. And so, I mean, he's a polymath across the sciences. He's phenomenal. Just really impressive guy, and a brilliant businessman, a very nice guy as well. Good golfer too. And Racer just signed a deal. I know it's hard. Racer just signed a deal for $745 million developing their drug. Amazing stuff. So really, really impressive guy. But yeah, so doing that, and then really all about just identifying places where you can make it a bit more efficient, identifying, are there other things we can do that's related to what we're currently doing that kind of make us more attractive to the market? Who should we talk to? How do we get there? What conferences should we go to? All that good stuff. And that's not all me, but just kind of making sure that you do those things, and then managing the cash and making sure you're able to fund it and all those good things. And so, yeah, lots of fun. And then I kind of moved out of finance really. And I ran the UK business for about 18 months and then went over to the States as chief commercial officer and then ultimately COO. And I did the CO job was really about putting structure in place. I'm not really a sales guy, but I understand how sales structures should work. And so making sure that we did that well. And again, taking from being peer to peer, scientist to scientist selling, which is brilliant, but you don't want to waste a lot of scientists' time. And so bringing a sales team and making a sales team more effective, and and having our scientists only have conversations that were worth their while having, rather than kind of wearing at the shoe leather and talking to people who didn't have money or weren't actually going to do a study. So that was interesting. And then COO was a brilliant role. That was I had the pleasure of actually publishing a paper. So I think I said to you yesterday, for a non-scientist, I've got two papers on ResearchGate. The first of which comes from my time at Invicro, which is they bought a business called Backpack. Backpack was a repository for patient healthcare data for people with rare diseases. Patients with those rare diseases, their data, and particularly if they were traveling or not. Yeah, so that's really how I kind of get stuck in. I'll give you my one other scientific. Did you pause me?
We've got a problem with the sound.
Okay.
Um, just when you started talking about that other paper, we're going to have to take it from there, the first paper.
No problem.
It broke up and then it froze.
Okay. Do you want me to cover the first paper again?
So just start from like you said, and I've actually got a paper or how you went into that.
Okay. So yeah, just again, despite my my handicap of no science, I have the first of my two ResearchGate papers came from my time at Invicro. So Invicro bought a business called Backpack Health, which is a repository for patient healthcare data, really aimed at people with rare diseases. It was founded by the guy who owned Eastpak, which is why it's called Backpack Health. And it was like being a backpack of your patient data. I think one of his children or both of his children had rare diseases. And so when they were traveling, one of them fell ill, and it was very difficult in the hospital because the hospital didn't know what was wrong with the kid. They didn't speak the same language. And so I kind of had the idea of making it safer for people by having this there. And so I got involved in reviewing a paper and write the paper. That was about that interaction between the medical community, your patient healthcare records, and the people's rare diseases. And so I'm ResearchGate with that, which is a proud moment for me, and for my mum. So sounds all very good.
And really useful because getting it on route, not ideal.
No, absolutely brilliant tool. A great thing to do. Backpack sadly doesn't exist anymore, but there are other businesses that do the same thing. I think it's for anybody with rare diseases, it's an absolute godsend. So if you fall sick in a kind of away from your own healthcare, there's a real risk of being, treated with something that has contraindications to what you're on, or will react badly, or people not understanding why you're having difficulty metabolizing something, whatnot. So it's an amazing thing, and all I brought to it was a boring but surprisingly useful knowledge of data protection laws and all that good stuff. So serves its purpose. I did get involved in another paper there, but not in a useful way. So we were participants in a Horizon 2020 grant. And I was the finance rep for it. And the study was being chaired, I'm going to forget Matteo's second name, but he was an Italian academic who was based up in Dundee University at the time. He left Dundee after Brexit, unsurprisingly. And And so the guys were going to give a presentation on our part of the project, which is great. And I was going to go up and talk finances and do all that good stuff. And then the day before we were flying, both of them pulled out. For one of them was sick, and the other one had some reason they couldn't go. So I ended up having to learn almost phonetically a presentation on the trans-cyclooctene reaction and its implication for some elements of imaging. I mean, so I had to give this 36-slide presentation to a room full of PhDs and postgrads and lecturers, all of whom understood way more of it than I did, and sheepishly go, if you have any questions, keep them to yourself, because there's no way in hell I'll be answering that. That's probably I don't mind public speaking. That was probably my least comfortable public speaking. Yep, that slide has a picture on it. You probably know what the picture means. I look, the red dots are big. So not probably not a career highlight for me, but kind of fun all the same. So yeah.
It just shows that public speaking depends on the person knowing what they're talking about.
Oh, completely so. Completely so. Again, I didn't mind. I have no problem getting up from a room full of people, but nobody learned anything from me giving that presentation, which wasn't ideal.
Keep that one under wraps. So
Yeah.
just go back a little bit to the you talk when you were talking about scaling businesses and transferring from academic partnerships to commercial ones. When you go and work at a company, is the exit strategy already in place, or do you have to formulate it yourself and work with the people there? How does that usually work?
I think it depends on the business. Certainly, when I joined, so with LGC, there was always an exit strategy. It was owned by Legal and General Ventures, and the private equity company doesn't exist anymore. But that they always have an exit strategy. That they invest for a period of time. They know what their exit is. That's it. Imanova was different. It was really spun out into an academic collaboration. The purpose of which was to become the thought leader in pet research in the UK. Which was a terrible thing to foist the organization with, in that every university in the country went, sorry, what? And there was great resentment of it, because it was seen as getting all of the funding that should have been going to all the universities. It actually wasn't. So I can say that from having been in control of the numbers, it really, really wasn't getting that money. But that was the impression that people had, and so there certainly wasn't an exit strategy for that when I joined. But it became really abundantly obvious quite quickly that we needed to find a way beyond the MRC and the existing shareholders, not out of any malice, but because they were pet's an expensive game, and to stay current in it really takes quite a lot of investment and money. If you're not generating that money, somebody needs to provide that money. And I started there in 2013, and the universities just didn't have that amount of money to pump into something. And if they did, they were pumping it into their own facilities and their own resources. And they've all invested massively in kind of, I suppose, everything since then. So it really became obvious to us as a management team that we really need to move on. And Kevin Cox was the chief exec, again, great guy. And he and I discussed it at large, and the management team, we discussed it at large, and we set about trying to find a way to have somebody else come in and be involved. Because I think for the universities, for the shareholders, it represented a liability. So to wind up a radiochemistry site is very expensive, and that site has 2 cyclotrons and 24 hot cells in it. I mean, that's maybe 6 million quid to take that apart, and who wants to face that liability? So there was an appeal from the shareholders' side to not have that liability, and from the management team, we wanted to continue doing the work that we were doing, which we felt had a value and felt could find a stronger market. We got to the point of breaking even, but weren't generating enough money to kind of get out of that. And we really needed to renew a lease and all that good stuff. So it made sense to get out of there. But there wasn't an exit strategy there when I joined. That wasn't really on the agenda. It wasn't, without being pejorative, it wasn't being run like a business in that sense. Although it was being run like a business because it needed to generate cash to survive. And so so not for that. Everything since then, absolutely. I learned early, I guess, maybe from the IVAX days, don't go into something unless you know what the exit strategy is, and that's very fair. So, yeah, the stuff I've done since then has all been kind of exit strategy orientated. And even when we sold to in vitro. 6 weeks later, they sold the whole business to Konica Minolta, and there was a clear exit strategy there as well. So, did two due diligences in the space of 3 months, which was kind of interesting. So, um, yeah, and I suppose the last two things I've gone into clear exit strategies, clear plans on how to exit, and that is important. If you're going to smaller businesses, that's important. If you're going into something massive, that's a different question. But I'm I suppose more interested in the smaller kind of private equity orientated business. I find them interesting because they're fast paced and lots of growth and lots of opportunity to kind of put things right and put structures in place and do all those good things. So that's kind of entertaining for somebody like me. So that's kind of fun. So
Yeah,
um,
how much longer do you think you've got at IAG before
uh,
exits?
it's a good question. I mean, I think we would hope to get through a transaction within a couple of years. It's a good, strong business. Spent a lot on the technology over the last couple of years. Very good platform, which I think is a great foundation stone for the business, and it's something that's missing in the industry. Is really good integrated platforms, cloud native, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'd say within a couple of years. I've been there a bit more than a year now. We've made a lot of progress. Business is stronger. The foundations are good. Just about commercializing now and expanding into new therapy areas and bringing that message to more people. So yeah, so pretty interesting. It's and that'll be a transaction as well, which will hopefully bring more money into to power the growth of the business and allow it to get bigger and more powerful. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting. And I did do an interim stint between in Vicro because I moved back from the States. We were in the States. We were in Boston for COVID, we timed it perfectly. Moved to Boston, and then 5 months later, COVID hit. So it was much more family time than I think we had planned in very close quarters. And I came back in 2022. The market was a little bit quiet. I kind of run my race with Vicro, and I took an interim stint with a brilliant little business called Chronomics, which is now rebranded as Hurdle. That's a remote testing business. They did a lot of business with COVID testing during COVID, and I kind of joined after that. And so, again, really good technology platform for sample tracking and that side of things. And it's where my second ResearchGate paper comes from. Interestingly enough, which is on a novel saliva-based testing system and whatnot. And all I did there was review what was a good paper, and they were, I suppose, having difficulty conceptualizing how to use the data that they gathered, and I just suggested a stratified approach to how you use that, and so they clearly did that. So I ended up with an authorship on a paper that I've never read, which is very bad on my part, but there you go. So incredible, diverse, completely different fields.
Entirely.
I need to
Does
get a
it,
physics one in there at some point. Then I'll have
yeah,
the hat trick.
set. Um, so do you think does it feel particularly different now when you enter a new company from organizing the finances side of things? Or is it right? Yeah, this is the same can apply here.
No, I think that they're all different, and I suppose I've been lucky in playing across all of the C-suite roles except for medical director. Don't ever join a company for a medical director, or CSO. Um, and so I think it's all about just taking the lessons you've learned from the experience and watching great people do great things and watching how they've done them and learning how to do that and applying to the specific circumstance. Every business is different. Every market is a little bit different. There are some generic lessons to learn. There's some generic stuff you can do. I haven't worked in finance for nearly 10 years now, but you still carry that with you in a whole, why are we spending that? Is that the best way to spend that? What are we spending it now? And organizing that side of things and how reporting should look and all that good. So always carry that with. But yeah, I think it's all about making sure that you're putting your money behind the things that actually will drive the business forward, that give you either some differentiator or that play to the market. And you understand your market as well. I think with the last couple of things I've done, one of the first things I've done is do a market segmentation in it. So who are we actually selling to? Okay, are they the right people for us to be selling to? Do they have money? Do they care? Do they know what they're buying? And doing that, because I think that's quite interesting. I think when you start a business, you have an idea what it's going to look like, and maybe 5 years down the track, you're still stuck with the concept we're doing this, but actually the world has moved on a little bit, and you just need to lift the head and have a look at, oh, actually, that's what they're interested in. Yeah, a little bit different. So that's kind of fun and interesting. And yeah, I think that's an important part. But yeah, I mean, there's some generic lessons, but lots of stuff is more situational and specific to the business you're in, and the people you're working with as well. People with different strengths and knowledges and all that good stuff, and making sure that you're kind of making the most of what they do know how to do, and maybe having to do less of the stuff that they don't really know how to do, and bring good people to do that.
Just before we end, Rowan, what are your hopes for the future of science?
It's an interesting question. I would say two prongs to this. One of which is probably more my social science side of things. The other is more pragmatic. So I think in terms of the more pragmatic one, I think I'm tired of hearing people just bandy AI around as a phrase. I think it's not a useful phrase. I'd much rather we talked about the specific tools that go under the badge of AI, so from Gen AI to machine learning to deep machine learning. And I think just being clear on what we're talking about and what each of those is useful for would be great. But more than anything, I hope we begin to harness those things in a good way that sort of powers those people with brilliant ideas to allow innovation to be faster and better across the sciences. I think there's been a rash of developments using AI, which have been, things and gotten headlines. But actually, if you look at it, and I've been to a couple of talks on this recently where people have been very excited about the NHS and NHS England doing stuff with AI. But actually, it starts with the data, and it starts with statisticians. The data has to be in the right format. Until we can agree what those formats are and make sure that we're acquiring data across the NHS and all the other organizations in a consistent way that makes it usable and accessible with, definitions of the headers to be used and all that good stuff, then AI for me will always be kind of a nearly. There are some phenomenal AI applications, some brilliant stuff, but I don't think we're at the point of fully realizing the potential of it, because there is that inconsistency. There's lots of historic data that if we could go back and sort out would be much more useful and power brilliant things. So I'm hoping we can kind of sort that side of things out.
We need AI to be where we need it to be in order to sort all that historic data, in order to get AI to where we need it to be. It sounds like
exactly that. And I'd like to see some focus on that, because that's not really where the focus is. It's assuming the data's there, but the data needs that help to get to the point where it's useful for the kind of. And the second thing, and this is related, is we've seen over the last maybe decade the politicization of science, in the sense of, you've got Anthony Fauci having to be pardoned in advance of being chased for having done what he did with regard to lockdowns, and even AI has become a kind of bit of political football itself. And I think that's a shame. I think science is the mechanism through which we understand the world, and through which we can begin to adjust the world to sort of take out some of the nasty stuff and bring great stuff. And I think making that a political football and bringing politics into it doesn't really help with that. I think as Neil deGrasse said, whether you believe in science or not doesn't really matter, because it's fact. And I think when it becomes something that there are political sides on, and COVID, I suppose, is a very stark example of that. It doesn't really help anybody. That's not helping us as a species to move forward. That's not helping scientists to do the brilliant things that they can. It just injects a rather unnecessary and unproductive kind of level of questioning of why you're doing things, and what the motivation is and who's benefiting from it. And I'd very much like to see us move beyond that to the point where we could recognize science as being a real force for good. And again, the kind of key to unlock the workings of the world. That to me would be important. That's a very grandiose and I suppose maybe a bit of a dream, but that I'd like to see that,
Try
but
and
won't.
we'll try and deflate the political football ASAP.
Exactly that.
Rowan, it's a great vision, and I hope I hope it comes to pass. Thank you so much for talking to us on Lab Matters today. It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Harriet. And you're very kind having a non-scientist in to pollute your scientific purity with rambling chat about being around scientists without being a scientist.
Not at all. Thanks, Rowan.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy that episode of Lab Matters? If you did, please do send it to the people that you think will enjoy it the most.